You know that moment when you discover your husband's idea of sold out tickets actually means sold out to his ex-girlfriend? Yeah. Well, welcome to my Friday night train wreck. There I was, sitting in a freaking VIP box at Madison Square Garden, sipping champagne and watching my husband George walk in with his college sweetheart Rachel, completely oblivious to the fact that his disappointed wife was already there. The look on his face when he spotted me? Pure comedy gold. But here's the kicker. I wasn't alone either. Let me back up for a hot second, because this whole mess started 3 weeks ago when George came home to our cozy Westchester suburb looking like someone had just told him Christmas was canceled. I've got some bad news about your birthday surprise, he said, doing that thing where he runs his hands through his hair like he's auditioning for a guilt-ridden soap opera. The Midnight Echoes concert? The tickets sold out in literally 3 minutes. I tried everything, even called those scalper websites, but they're asking for like $2,000 per seat. Now, for context, the Midnight Echoes has been my absolute obsession since college. We're talking full-blown, poster on the wall, know every lyric by heart kind of devotion. George knew this. Heck, half our wedding playlist was their songs. So when he promised to get me tickets for my 32nd birthday, I was basically bouncing off the walls of our little colonial house like a caffeinated teenager. But there he was, looking all defeated and apologetic, and honestly, I felt bad for the guy. Concert tickets are brutal these days. It's like trying to catch a unicorn while blindfolded. So I did what any loving wife would do. I swallowed my disappointment, ordered Thai takeout, and told him it was totally fine. "Don't worry about it, babe," I said, giving him my best understanding wife smile. "We'll catch them next tour." George seemed relieved, maybe a little too relieved, but I chalked it up to him feeling guilty about disappointing me. We spent the evening watching Netflix and sharing pad thai, and I genuinely thought that was the end of it. Boy, was I wrong. Fast forward to last Friday. I'm at Starbucks grabbing my usual oat milk latte when Jake Morrison, that friend everyone has who somehow knows everyone's business before they do, slides up next to me in line like he's about to spill government secrets. "So, Jake says, stirring way too much sugar into his coffee. "I heard George managed to work some magic for the concert after all. Pretty sweet that he got VIP box seats." I literally choked on my drink. "Excuse me, what now?" Jake's face went through about 17 different expressions in 2 seconds flat. "Oh no. Oh no, no, no. I wasn't supposed to say anything, was I?" "Jake," I said, using my most threatening suburban mom voice, "what exactly did you hear?" And this is where it gets really good, folks. Turns out, not only did George successfully get those impossible tickets, but he'd been bragging to our entire friend group about scoring a whole VIP box for the concert. The same friend group that includes his college buddies who still worship the ground his ex-girlfriend Rachel walks on. According to Jake's increasingly panicked explanation, George had told everyone that I couldn't make it because of some important work commitment, which was news to me, considering I work part-time at a dental office and had specifically requested that Friday off months ago. "He said he didn't want the extra ticket to go to waste," Jake continued, looking like he wanted to disappear into his overpriced coffee. "So he invited Rachel to join the group. For old time's sake." For old time's sake. Right. I stood there in the middle of Starbucks, holding my latte like it was a weapon, processing the fact that my husband had lied to my face, excluded me from my own birthday surprise, and invited his ex-girlfriend as his plus one. The same Rachel who still likes every single one of his Facebook posts and comments, heart eyes emojis on his gym selfies. The barista called out someone's complicated order. Triple shot, half calf, oat milk macchiato with extra foam, and suddenly I had an idea that was either brilliant or completely insane. "Jake," I said, turning to face him with what I hoped was my most innocent smile, "do you happen to have Daniel Chen's number?" Daniel, my college boyfriend. The one who went on to become some hotshot music producer in the city. The same Daniel who George still gets weird and territorial about whenever his name comes up in conversation, even though we broke up like 8 years ago. Jake's eyes went wide. "Emily, what are you thinking?" "I'm thinking," I said, pulling out my phone, "that George isn't the only one who can play the nostalgia card. Because here's the thing about being married to someone for 6 years. You learn all their insecurities, all their soft spots, and definitely all their triggers. And if there's one thing that gets under George's skin more than anything else, it's the idea that Daniel and I had this amazing, passionate relationship that he somehow can't compete with. Which isn't even true, by the way. Daniel and I were perfectly fine together. But we were also 22 and had about as much emotional maturity as a pair of golden retrievers. Still, George doesn't need to know that. So there I stood, in the middle of a suburban Starbucks, plotting what might be either the most epic revenge or the most spectacular relationship suicide in recent memory. And you know what the crazy part is? I was actually excited. Let me tell you something about texting your ex-boyfriend after 8 years of radio silence. It's like trying to ride a bike while juggling flaming torches. Awkward doesn't even begin to cover it. I must have typed and deleted about 15 different messages before settling on something that didn't sound completely desperate or totally insane. Hey Daniel, this is Emily Thompson, used to be Rodriguez. I know this is random, but I have a weird favor to ask. Are you free for a quick call? He responded within 10 minutes, which honestly surprised me. Emily, wow. Blast from the past. Sure, I can talk. This sounds intriguing. When I called him, Daniel sounded exactly the same. That warm, slightly raspy voice that used to make me melt during our late-night phone calls sophomore year. After about 5 minutes of catching up, he's doing great, producing music for some pretty big names, still living in his Brooklyn loft. I dove into my completely ridiculous request. So here's the deal, I said, pacing around my kitchen like a caged tiger. My husband lied to me about concert tickets, invited his ex as his date, and I'm wondering if you'd like to help me crash their little reunion party. There was a pause. Then Daniel started laughing. That deep, genuinely amused laugh I remembered so well. Let me get this straight, he said. Your husband is taking his ex to see the Midnight Echoes, your favorite band, and told you the tickets were sold out? In a VIP box, no less. And you want me to be your +1 for some epic revenge scenario? Pretty much, yeah. Another pause. Emily, this is either the most brilliant thing I've ever heard, or we're both about to destroy your marriage. Honestly, at this point, I'm curious to see which one it'll be. Here's what I didn't expect. Daniel was totally on board. Turns out, he'd been trying to score tickets to this concert for months for some client event. And when I mentioned I could get us into the VIP section, he was practically doing backflips over the phone. I can get us legitimate passes through the venue, he said. I know the event coordinator. We'll be there totally legally, just in case your husband tries to pull some she's crashing the party nonsense. God, I'd forgotten how resourceful Daniel could be. Back in college, this man could talk his way into anything. Exclusive parties, sold-out shows. Even that one time he convinced the dean to let us use the auditorium for our friend's surprise birthday party. The next few days were a whirlwind of secret planning that felt like I was organizing a military operation. Daniel arranged everything. VIP passes, a table right in the prime viewing area, even champagne service. Meanwhile, I had to act completely normal around George, which was harder than you might think when your husband is actively lying to your face. Wednesday night, George came home from work drinks, which I now suspected involved planning his big date night with Rachel, and actually had the audacity to try comforting me about the concert situation. I know you're disappointed about missing the Midnight Echoes, babe, he said, wrapping his arms around me while I loaded the dishwasher. Maybe we can plan a weekend getaway instead? Somewhere nice and relaxing? I turned around and looked at this man I'd been married to for 6 years. This person who used to be my best friend. And I felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no hurt. Just this weird, detached curiosity about how far he was willing to take this charade. That sounds lovely, I said, giving him a kiss on the cheek. You're so thoughtful. Thursday morning, Jake texted me in a complete panic. Emily, please tell me you're not doing anything crazy tomorrow night. George is so excited about the concert, and I feel terrible about spilling the beans. I texted back, don't worry about it. Everything's going to work out perfectly. Which was true, in a way. Just not how anyone expected. Friday afternoon, I went full glam squad at the salon downtown. Hair, nails, even a professional makeup session. The works. When the stylist asked what the occasion was, I told her it was for a surprise party. Again, technically true. "You look absolutely stunning," she said, stepping back to admire her work. "Whoever this surprise is for is going to be speechless." "Oh, I'm counting on it," I replied, checking myself out in the mirror. The woman staring back at me looked confident, sophisticated, and ready for whatever the evening might bring. It had been a long time since I'd seen that version of myself. George texted around 4 p.m. "Working late tonight, don't wait up. Love you." I responded with a heart emoji and immediately called an Uber to Manhattan. The ride into the city gave me plenty of time to second-guess every single decision that had led to this moment. Was I being petty? Probably. Was I potentially blowing up my entire life over a concert? Maybe. Did I care? Surprisingly, not really. By the time I walked into Madison Square Garden and saw Daniel waiting for me near the VIP entrance, looking absolutely incredible in a perfectly tailored black suit, I realized something important. I hadn't felt this alive, this excited about anything, in months. "Well," Daniel said, offering me his arm with that trademark smile. "Ready to give your husband the surprise of his life?" "Let's do this," I said, and meant every word. The real show was about to begin. Walking into that VIP box felt like stepping into an alternate universe where I was the main character of my own life again, instead of just a supporting actress in George's personal drama. Daniel had outdone himself with the setup. Our table was positioned perfectly, close enough to the stage for an incredible view, but also with a clear sightline to the entrance where George's group would inevitably make their grand appearance. The champagne was already chilled, the lighting was perfect, and honestly, I felt like a movie star. "You know," Daniel said, settling into his chair and surveying the scene, "I'd forgotten how much fun you are when you're plotting something. I'd forgotten I was capable of plotting anything," I admitted, taking a sip of champagne that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. "Marriage has a way of making you forget who you used to be." We spent the first 20 minutes catching up properly. Not the surface-level phone conversation we'd had earlier, but real talk about life, dreams, and how we'd both changed over the years. Daniel told me about his music career taking off, the clients he was working with, his recent breakup with some model whose name I definitely recognized from Instagram. "What about you?" he asked. "Are you happy? And I mean actually happy. Not just fine or can't complain." It was such a simple question, but I realized I hadn't asked myself that in years. I'd been so focused on being a good wife, maintaining our social life, keeping up with the Joneses in our little suburban bubble, that I'd completely lost track of what actually made me happy. "I thought I was," I said slowly, "but sitting here right now, I feel more like myself than I have in months, maybe years." Daniel nodded like he understood exactly what I meant. "Sometimes it takes a shock to the system to wake up, you know?" Before I could respond, I spotted them. George's unmistakable laugh carried across the VIP section as he walked in with his little entourage, 3 of his college buddies, and right there beside him, Rachel. And oh my God, Rachel looked exactly like I'd expected. Perfectly straight blonde hair, that effortless, "I woke up like this" makeup, wearing a black dress that probably cost more than my car payment. She was laughing at something George had said, touching his arm in that casual but not really casual way that women do when they're marking their territory. "Is that them?" Daniel asked, following my gaze. "Yep. The blonde is Rachel, my replacement for the evening." "She's pretty," Daniel said matter-of-factly. "She's gorgeous," I corrected. "And she knows it." What happened next was like watching a slow-motion car crash that you can't look away from. George was clearly in full show-off mode, pointing out different aspects of the venue to Rachel, making sure she had the best seat, being absolutely charming in that way that used to make my heart flutter when we first started dating. The thing that really got to me wasn't the touching or the laughing. It was how animated George looked. When was the last time I'd seen him that excited about anything involving me? When was the last time he'd put that much effort into making sure I was comfortable, entertained, impressed? Daniel said quietly. "You realize this isn't just about the concert, right?" "What do you mean?" "I mean watching you watch them." This goes deeper than him lying about tickets. He was right, and we both knew it. This whole situation had just forced me to confront something I'd been avoiding for months. The growing distance between George and me, the way we'd settled into this comfortable but passionless routine, the fact that we'd become roommates more than romantic partners. "So, what do you want to do?" Daniel asked. "We could leave right now. Go get dinner somewhere. Pretend this never happened." I considered it for about 30 seconds. It would be the mature thing to do, the safe thing. But then I looked over at George again, watched him lean in close to whisper something in Rachel's ear, saw her throw her head back and laugh like he was the funniest person on earth, and something inside me snapped. Not in an angry way, in a liberating way. "No," I said, straightening up in my chair. "I want to see this play out." "Are you sure?" "Daniel, I spent 3 weeks believing my husband when he told me he'd tried everything to get these tickets. I felt guilty for being disappointed. I made excuses for him. And the whole time he was planning this elaborate evening with another woman." I took another sip of champagne. "I think I deserve to enjoy the show he didn't think I was worthy of attending." Daniel grinned. "Now that's the Emily I remember." The opening act was just finishing up when George's group finally settled at their table. They were maybe 30 feet away from us, close enough that I could hear George explaining the band's history to Rachel, who was hanging on every word like he was delivering a TED Talk on rocket science. "You know what the funny part is?" I said to Daniel. "Half the stuff he's telling her is wrong. The Midnight Echoes formed in Seattle, not Portland. And their breakthrough album was Neon Dreams, not Electric Nights." "Should we go correct him?" Daniel asked with a mischievous smile. "Oh, we're going to do something much better than that. Because here's what George didn't know about his ex-college girlfriend. She was absolutely terrified of being embarrassed in public. I remembered that from the few times we'd all hung out together during our overlapping social circles years ago. Rachel was the type of person who needed to be the most impressive person in any room, and she did not handle being upstaged well. And Daniel? Daniel was about to become my secret weapon. The main act was about to start, and I had front row seats to the most interesting show of the evening. And it wasn't going to be on the stage. The moment George spotted me, I swear time stopped. Like, genuinely froze. His face went through this incredible journey of emotions. Confusion, recognition, panic, and then this dawning horror as he realized exactly how screwed he was. I gave him my biggest, brightest smile and raised my champagne glass in a little toast. The look of absolute terror in his eyes was worth every penny I didn't spend on this evening. "Is that your husband?" Daniel asked, though he was clearly trying not to laugh. "That's him. And judging by the way he just choked on his drink, I'd say our presence has been noted." Rachel, bless her heart, was completely oblivious to the drama unfolding. She was too busy taking selfies with the stage in the background to notice that George had gone completely pale and was staring at our table like he'd seen a ghost. The first song started, and I made a point of singing along to every single word, dancing in my seat, and generally having the absolute time of my life. Daniel, to his credit, played along perfectly, laughing at my jokes, leaning in close during the louder parts, being the perfect attentive date. Meanwhile, George kept stealing glances at us, clearly trying to figure out what the heck was happening. I could practically see the gears turning in his head. How did Emily get tickets? Who is that guy? How much trouble am I in? About halfway through the third song, Rachel finally noticed George's distraction. "George, honey, you seem a little distracted," she said, loud enough that I could hear her over the music. "Is everything okay?" That's when George made his first tactical error. Instead of being honest, he doubled down on the lie. "Oh, it's nothing," he said, pulling his attention back to her. "I just thought I recognized someone, but I was wrong." "Wrong? Wrong?" I turned to Daniel with my most dazzling smile. "Dance with me?" Now, I should mention that Daniel and I had always been incredible dance partners back in college. We had this natural rhythm together that used to make people stop and watch when we hit the dance floor at parties. And apparently, 8 years hadn't changed that chemistry one bit. We moved to the small dance area near our table, and I'm not exaggerating when I say we absolutely commanded attention. Other people in the VIP section started watching us, smiling, clearly enjoying our little performance. The music was perfect, upbeat enough for some serious moves, but romantic enough that when Daniel spun me around and pulled me close, it looked absolutely electric. That's when George made his second tactical error. He got up from his table. I watched him excuse himself from Rachel and start walking toward us, his face set in that determined expression he gets when he's about to do something stupid. But here's the thing. I was ready for him. "Em!" he called out as he approached, trying to sound casual. "What a crazy coincidence. I didn't expect to see you here." I stopped dancing and turned to face him with my most innocent smile. "George, hi honey. Yeah, isn't it amazing? When Daniel called and said he had VIP passes, I just couldn't pass up the opportunity to see the Midnight Echoes live." "Daniel?" George's voice went up about 3 octaves. "Oh, you remember Daniel Chen, right? From college?" I gestured to Daniel, who stepped forward with the most perfectly polite smile. "George, good to see you again," Daniel said, extending his hand. "Emily mentioned you're a big fan of the band, too." The handshake lasted about 10 seconds longer than necessary, and I could see George trying to squeeze harder than normal, while Daniel remained completely unfazed. It was like watching a peacock try to intimidate a lion. "I thought you said the tickets were sold out," George said to me, his voice tight. "Oh, they were. But you know how well-connected Daniel is in the music industry. He managed to pull some strings." I paused for effect. "It's so wonderful having friends who go the extra mile to make sure you don't miss out on something important to you." The emphasis on extra mile hit exactly as intended. George's jaw twitched. "Well," George said, clearly struggling to maintain composure, "I should get back to my friends." "Oh yes, how rude of me," I said, as if I'd just remembered. "You should introduce me to your date. She looks lovely." If looks could kill, George would have committed murder right there in the VIP section of Madison Square Garden. "She's not my date," he said quickly. "Rachel is just, we're here as friends, with the group." "Right, friends," I said, nodding like I totally believed him. "Well, you two have fun. Daniel and I are going to get back to enjoying this incredible show." George stood there for another moment, clearly wanting to say more but not knowing what, before finally trudging back to his table, where Rachel was watching the whole interaction with obvious curiosity. "That was masterful," Daniel said in my ear as we resumed dancing. "I'm not done yet," I replied. The rest of the concert was pure magic, but not because of the band. Every song gave me another opportunity to show George exactly what he was missing. When they played a slow song, Daniel and I swayed together like we were the only 2 people in the room. When they played something upbeat, we were laughing and dancing and looking like we were having the absolute best time of our lives. Which, honestly, we were. By the time the final encore ended, George looked like he'd aged about 10 years, and Rachel had clearly picked up on the tension because she kept asking him questions he couldn't properly answer. As people started filing out, Daniel leaned close to me. "So, what's the plan now?" I looked over at George, who was helping Rachel with her coat while shooting desperate glances in our direction, and I realized something important. I didn't need a plan. The revenge was complete. I'd shown up, I'd had an amazing time, and I'd reminded both George and myself that I was worth more than lies and substitutes. "Now," I said, linking my arm through Daniel's, "we go get the best late-night pizza in Brooklyn and figure out what comes next." So here's the thing about revenge. It's supposed to feel satisfying, right? Like this big moment of triumph where you finally get back at the person who wronged you and everything feels balanced again. But sitting in Daniel's favorite pizza place in Brooklyn at midnight, sharing a slice of pepperoni and processing everything that had just happened, I realized the real victory wasn't embarrassing George or proving a point about loyalty and honesty in marriage. The real victory was remembering who I used to be. "You know what's funny?" I said, pulling cheese off my slice in that completely undignified way that George always hated. 6 months ago, if someone told me I'd spend an evening dancing with my ex-boyfriend while my husband watched from across the room, I would have been horrified. Like, clutching my pearls. What would the neighbors think? Horrified. Daniel laughed, that warm sound I'd forgotten I missed. And now? Now I'm wondering why I spent so many years worrying about what other people thought instead of worrying about what I thought. The truth is, the concert was just the catalyst. The real problem had been building for years. The way George and I had settled into this comfortable but passionless routine. The way we'd stopped really seeing each other. The way I'd gradually made myself smaller and smaller to fit into this idea of what a good suburban wife should be. "So what happens now?" Daniel asked. "Are you going home tonight?" I'd been dreading that question all evening, but now that it was here, the answer felt surprisingly clear. "I'm going home," I said. "But not to pretend this didn't happen. George and I need to have a very honest conversation about what our marriage actually is versus what we've been pretending it is. And if that conversation doesn't go well?" I thought about that for a moment, picturing George pacing around our kitchen, trying to explain away the evening, making excuses, maybe even turning it around to blame me for overreacting. "Then at least I'll know I tried," I said. "And I'll also know that I'm capable of being happy on my own terms." Daniel nodded, understanding exactly what I meant. "For what it's worth, watching you tonight reminded me why I fell for you in the first place. You've got this incredible spirit when you let yourself shine." "Yeah, well, apparently I'd forgotten that for a while." We finished our pizza and shared a cab back to Manhattan, where Daniel's driver was waiting to take me home to Westchester. Before I got out, he handed me his business card. "I know tonight was about proving a point to George," he said, "but I meant what I said earlier. You deserve to be with someone who sees how amazing you are and never takes that for granted." I tucked the card into my purse, not sure what it meant for the future, but grateful to have the option. The ride home gave me plenty of time to think about what I was going to say to George. Part of me expected to find him waiting up, ready for a fight. Part of me thought he might pretend the whole evening never happened. What I found was George sitting at our kitchen table with 2 cups of coffee, looking like he'd been rehearsing a speech for hours. "Em," he said as soon as I walked in, "we need to talk." "Yes, we do. I can explain about tonight." "George," I interrupted, sitting down across from him. "Before you start explaining, I want you to answer one question honestly. When was the last time you were excited to spend an evening with me?" He opened his mouth, then closed it, clearly not expecting that question. "I don't mean obligated," I continued. "I don't mean dutiful. I mean genuinely excited. The way you were excited to show Rachel around that VIP box tonight." The silence stretched between us for a long moment. "I don't know," he finally admitted. "I honestly don't know." And that, right there, was the real truth we'd both been avoiding. We talked until sunrise, not fighting, not accusing, just 2 people who'd grown apart trying to figure out if there was anything left worth fighting for. We talked about the lies, the distance, the way we'd both stopped trying without realizing it. In the end, we decided to try counseling, not because either of us was confident it would work, but because we owed it to 6 years of marriage to at least make the effort. 6 months later, George and I filed for divorce. It was amicable, sad, but ultimately the right choice for both of us. And Daniel? Well, let's just say that business card didn't stay in my purse forever. These days, I live in a cute apartment in the city. I go to concerts whenever I want, and I dance like nobody's watching, because most of the time nobody is, and that's perfectly fine with me. Turns out, the best revenge isn't getting back at someone who wronged you. The best revenge is building a life so good that you forget why you needed revenge in the first place.